Hello, my name is Nathan Scheffler. I'm the clinical director here at Pennsylvania Adult and Teen Challenge in the short-term program and the detox program. As such, I get to oversee all the clinical and counseling activities in those two programs. I've been working here about 5 years. 2 of those years I spent as a counselor, working with people who are entering recovery and the families, you folks, who are supporting them. I'm excited to be sharing with you. I'll share this with you every time I talk to you, that I'm excited to be able to sit down with you, share something about addiction with you. You don't realize the impact that you have on your loved one. The support, your encouragement, how important that is in being able to motivate recovery and change. Today we're talking about the myths of addiction and how to use accurate knowledge of addiction and recovery to help a person motivate change. Think about the reason why we're sharing this with you folks. If you're trying to help somebody, but you misunderstand what it is that you're trying to help them with, you'll end up applying pressure or helping in the wrong place. At the best, you won't have any impact, and at the worst, you'll actually be causing harm. So what we're hoping to do is to dispel some of these myths to help relate it to you folks as family members, and how can you use an accurate understanding of addiction and recovery to be able to help motivate your loved one to continue pursuing recovery. So that's going to be what the focus of this training is on. Let's take a look at this first slide. Common responses to the addicted person. Here's one of the first things that comes up is stigma. Okay, and stigma has to do with a misunderstanding or bias against something. So a lot of people in the United States have a stigmatized view of addiction. People experience this stigma when they're trying to enter recovery. When they start talking about their addiction, everybody has an idea of what that looks like, what that means, and it's typically a wrong understanding. It has to do with this person is a bad person. And an addicted person carries that guilt and shame with them, and you, the family, actually carry a lot of that guilt and shame with you as well. Found a quote from a mental health service out of Zimbabwe, of all places. This is an international issue. It's not something that's restricted only to the United States. A mother says, "My son uses drugs and I leave him to steal from me because I would rather he stole from me than from the neighbors. If my neighbors knew I would be disowned by the community, they will blame me, say I'm a failed mother, and say I don't pray enough." And right there in that one simple quote, we see so many things that people wrongly assume about addiction and about the family members of addiction. And people start to believe, oh, well, he wasn't disciplined enough as a child. She wasn't loved enough by her family and she had to find that love someplace else. They start to think maybe it's a spiritual issue and it's because the parents didn't pray enough or because the child wasn't included in the right religious activities when they were growing up. And as we start to dig into addiction, we look at it as a brain disease. We start to realize none of this stuff is really true. Most often we end up doing nothing because of the fear of others' opinions. We might not actually do anything to help motivate or encourage a person to enter treatment because we're worried about what would other people know if they found out. We always talk about this, that addiction is as much a family disease as it is an individual disease. And so you guys are experiencing addiction just as much as your loved one is. You guys are entering recovery about the same time, and you need to be pursuing your own recovery. But again, that stigma can hold us back because we don't want to talk about it. We don't want to share with other people what's happened to us. By engaging other people, by participating in trainings like this, and by coming to our family day sessions, you're actually starting to break out of that stigma. You're starting to find other people who are experiencing similar things to what you're experiencing, and you're working through this issue of stigma. Stigma has been a problem for a long time, to the point where in the 70s and 80s they started to develop federal United States government laws that around confidentiality, and the whole purpose of those laws was to allow people to enter treatment without anybody else knowing. So currently, we can't discuss any individual person's treatment or even the fact that they've called us and asked about treatment without their written consent, allowing us to release that information. There are just a few caveats to that, a couple of things that allow us to release information if a person's in danger or if they're hurt or dying. But up until that point, we can't share with anybody that they've sought treatment or that they're in treatment because of stigma, because people would lose their jobs. They wouldn't be able to enter treatment if they didn't have that level of confidentiality and protection. Here's another common response to an addicted person. People begin to feel frustrated or baffled by the addiction, and they try to correct the addiction or the addicted person with greater embracing, sound logical advice, punishment, threatening, bargaining, pleading, all of these things. And maybe you've been there. Maybe you've tried all these things and you haven't seen it work. And there's a very good reason why you can't love a person out of addiction. You can't plead with them enough to get them to end their addiction. It has to come down to the individual themselves making the decision to enter treatment. We're going to look at a couple of different things that we can do as family members to help a person become motivated to enter treatment. Another thing that we start to do is we start to blame ourselves. And again, shame and guilt is just rampant in this field. We see it in the addicted person. They start to look at all the stuff that the addiction led them to do, and they experience so much shame and guilt. And a lot of that time, that shame and guilt keeps them from moving forward in their recovery. It's the funniest thing. The things that they've done creates this shame and guilt and prevents them from not doing those things anymore. And we see that with our family members as well. Shame and guilt come alongside, and they motivate us to keep it hidden under wraps. We talk about these vampire thoughts, vampire feelings, that when we keep them in the dark, they remain powerful. When we bring them to light, then that's when they start to dissipate and fade, and we can actually begin to work through them with other people maybe, and begin to work through these thoughts and ideas that are stuck in our mind that have so much power over us. I'll remind you of the 3 C's of Al-Anon. You can't cause anybody else to have an addiction. There may be influences, things that you participated in your life or things that you've done in your life that may have influenced somebody or made it more likely, but you can't, at the end of the day, you can't cause somebody to have an addiction. There's nothing you can do to control their addiction. You can't control it. It's all, by the time it gets to late stage addiction, it's 100% instinctual. And the person themselves has lost control over it. And we know that the only person that we have any kind of control over is ourselves and the next decision that we make. And you can't cure it. An addiction is not something that can be cured. It's something that can go into remission and recovery, but it's never something that is truly cured. I shared this in my last training. If you've missed that one, I encourage you to go back and look at it. There's going to be a couple of things that I breeze over here that I went into a little bit more in depth in the Addictions 101 training last month. But this is an important thing to bring up again, that there are 23.2 million chemically addicted persons in the United States. Only 10% of people who are in chemical addiction actually find their way into treatment. And it's such a blessing for people to be able to enter treatment because of the small amount of people that actually get the chance to. Just something to remind everybody about, that treatment is not something that everybody gets, any kind of treatment. We see that family leverage and education points to the highest chance of success in drawing addicted individuals out of the shadows of addiction and into the light of treatment and recovery. We're going to talk about a couple of different things that you guys can do to help to bring your person, your loved one, to influence them towards treatment. Here we go. Let's dive right in, and this is our first myth of addiction. Overcoming addiction is simply a matter of willpower. You can stop using drugs if you really want to. And this is one of the biggest misunderstandings of what late stage addiction is. If you go back, again, Addictions 101, we take a look at what happens to the brain and how it changes, and it becomes a deeply embedded brain disease, which changes the way that the brain functions, and we lose our ability to make decisions about good and bad, right and wrong. We're operating on an instinctual animal level, and addiction becomes survival. It hijacks the brain like a parasite. I'm going to use that word a couple of times here. A parasite that gets into the brain and starts controlling it and takes away the ability to make decisions, and it alters the brain. I want to share with you a resource that I found tremendously helpful. A gentleman named Kevin McCauley, McCauley. He's got 2 DVDs that are out. One is called, give me just a second. One is called Memo to Self, and it's about his ability to, what he found led him to long-term recovery. Memo to Self. And Memo to Self is a DVD that shows what he's found through research, through his own personal experience, and through years of being a naval surgeon. He's a flight surgeon on an aircraft carrier who became addicted himself, lost his ability to serve in the military and be a doctor anymore, and so he turned all of his attention to studying addiction. And he found a very simple 6 or 7 step process to prevent relapse. The other one is called Pleasure Unwoven. I just remembered that. Pleasure Unwoven is a little bit more in depth, and it spends a lot of time focusing on the neurology of addiction and the way that the brain has changed. But one of the things that he shares is that if we look at addiction, stopping addiction just being a matter of willpower, he says if you point a gun at an addict's head and so imagine it's an alcoholic and you put a drink in front of them and you say, you can take that drink, but I'm going to shoot you, that the addict will not take the drink. And so we can step back and we can say, well, then this addicted person is not truly addicted. They can choose to stop whenever they want to. We just proved it. We pointed a gun at their head and they decided not to. But the difference is that addicted person, what's going through their brain with a gun pointed at their head is that they're trying to figure out, can I get that drink into me before the gun goes off? Is there anything that, how quickly, how serious is this individual? Is the gun loaded? They're not thinking about this is a life or death situation. They're running a risk assessment of between 2 very good options in their mind. And so we look at this being a matter of willpower, and we look at the fact that this is a disease. It's something that's taken over and taken control of the brain and removed the ability to make decisions. A disease defined as any condition that causes pain, dysfunction, distress, social problems, or death to the person afflicted, or similar problems for those in contact with the person. And this is a Wikipedia definition, but we see here that those who are closely connected to the person with the disease can also experience very similar conditions. Disease is not necessarily the reason for the drug use, but it's absolutely the result of drug use. And again, we looked at the stages of addiction last time, where it starts with experimentation, and then it goes into regular use, and then finally late stage addiction. And that late stage addiction, at other points along that path, there are times when a person can step out of it and make the decision to stop. But by the time we get to late stage addiction, we realize that they've lost that ability to stop. And that's one of the reasons why the inpatient treatment is so important and so effective, is because an individual needs to step away from their environment. They need to have somebody else take control for a little while. Just like the person has given over control of themselves to the drugs, they need to choose to give control of themselves over to somebody else. All they have to do is make that first decision. And once they do that, somebody else can step in and come alongside them, help them through the process of engaging recovery. We see that in AA, where the first couple of steps of AA are focused on NA and AA. The first couple of steps are focused on giving up control of myself. As long as I control myself, I'm still not going to be able to make the decision to stop. Once I give control over to somebody else and allow them complete control over my life, then they can help me to stop, and then slowly return that control to me as time goes on and I become more capable of staying sober myself. If we look at the issue of this is a disease or this is the person's decision versus disease, look around society today and you'll see that that's deeply embedded in every single aspect of society, from criminal justice to everywhere that we look, to treatment. Some people believe that treatment is just a matter of willpower, and there's treatment models that are set up around that. Other people believe that treatment is a disease and we're working from a medical model to be able to address addiction. If we start to look at this from the disease perspective, we've seen much more success in that realm, in being able to look at it from a disease perspective. Somebody who needs medical help, somebody who needs somebody else to come in and help them to begin their recovery. A lot of the times families can be part of that process. Myth number 2, we look at that there is only one route from addiction to recovery. There's only one path to recovery. We've talked about, in this field, we spend time talking about many different ways that a person can find sobriety, and not all of them work as well for everybody. We firmly believe in inpatient treatment. We believe that by the time a person gets to this point, we assess them and determine that they need inpatient treatment, that this is the best option for them. But that's the reason why we do an assessment. In the state of Pennsylvania, for every single level of care that insurance pays for, we have to complete an assessment to determine if it's the appropriate level of care for that person. That right there proves that there's different things that work for different people. It's all based on the individual person. It's based on their level of addiction, how long they've been using, what kinds of drugs they've been using, how late in the game they are. And then we determine, based on that, whether they need outpatient or inpatient treatment. But there's a lot of other things that can help people as well. All of them that are currently in use have success stories to back them up. They're all evidence-based. There's evidence that's there to prove that they work. But a couple of different options that we look at, there's medication-assisted treatment. Things like Suboxone, Methadone, Vivitrol. These are drugs that can help with alcohol and opiate use disorders, drugs that can be taken on a regular basis to prevent relapse and use. There's a lot of stigma. Talked about stigma at the very beginning around medication-assisted treatment. People say you weren't addicted to one thing, but now you're addicted to another. But if we look at what's happening, what some of the evidence is, what some of that, some of the success stories are, we find people who haven't been able to stop, and they've been trying other treatment options over and over and over again. They haven't been able to find success for one reason or another. And again, we could say that it's just a matter of their willpower. But these are people who desperately want to stop and can't find the ability within themselves to stop. And then they begin medication-assisted treatment, and now they've got 5 or 6 years clean and sober, holding a job, staying engaged with their family. And it's because of this medication that they take that helps them through it. Medication-assisted treatment is not a life sentence anymore. It's something that can be, an individual can choose to, with the help of a counselor and medical advice, they can begin to wean off of the drugs that they're taking. But medication-assisted treatment is a viable option for people to enter recovery. Inpatient versus outpatient treatment, and again, working in inpatient treatment, I firmly believe in what we do here. I've seen the success stories to prove it. I believe that once somebody gets to late-stage addiction, that outpatient treatment, where they're still involved in the environment that they're in, might not be enough, and that stepping away from that environment, finding the level of care and the level of counseling that we can provide here, where they're engaged with another individual every single day of the week. They're engaged with a community of people that are in recovery, and they have on-site 24/7 staff oversight. That's one of the best ways to begin recovery. And again, short-term treatment is not recovery in itself. It's not all of treatment by itself. We always step somebody down to another level of care, but inpatient treatment is a fantastic way to begin addictions treatment. Outpatient treatment is an outstanding option as well. It provides support while the individual begins to engage back in their community. The other thing the outpatient treatment can do is, if a person can't step away from their life for 30 days or for 28 days or for 3 weeks, for 21 days, they can still continue working, continue living their life, but they can begin to get help through outpatient treatment. Some people quit cold turkey, and I've met people who have really good success stories from just adding one day. They decide, that's it, I'm done. They engage some community supports, pastors, family, somebody else to help them through it. They sleep off their withdrawal symptoms on a couch somewhere, and then they begin this process of long-term recovery. I've seen it happen. It doesn't happen nearly as much as with the use of treatment. Through community support, again, churches, family members, that can help somebody to engage recovery. And of course, we know about the tremendously successful Alcoholics Anonymous and Narcotics Anonymous. They've been very successful for about 100 years now, beginning in the early 1900s. This is a group that got together. They found through a shared community of people in recovery, sharing ideas of how to stay sober and motivating each other, giving up control of themselves and allowing control to be given to a higher power and a sponsor. They found success in recovery. One of the hardest things to communicate is for people who are already in recovery, who found recovery one way. Maybe that's you, maybe it's a family member. As a family member, you found recovery and you believe that the way that you found recovery is the way that is best. And recognizing that there is no best way is sometimes one of the harder things to communicate. But understand this, that everybody is different. Every single individual is different, as there aren't two people that are exactly the same. Everybody has different brain development. Everybody has different levels of addiction. And we put all those things together and recognize that one treatment modality is not going to work for everybody. We're going to spend a little bit more time on myth number 3, this idea of a rock bottom. I don't know where this came from, but addicted persons, the myth is that an addicted person has to reach rock bottom before they can get better. What we recognize is that recovery can happen at any point, with a little bit of help from some loved ones helping to motivate the individual, some influence. We can effectively raise the bottom. We can bring the bottom up for the person. There's a couple of reasons for this. What it means to hitting bottom means facing reality, hitting a hard and painful place where you stop and you look around and you say, wow, so this is really bad. I really do need some help. Again, with those stages of addiction that we talked about last month, the beginning stages of addiction, there is no belief that anything is wrong. We're doing okay. We're still going to work. We're still going to school. We're able to use just on the weekends and just recreationally and have a little bit of fun. When we start to get into that middle stage of addiction, that's when we start to experience tolerance and dependence. Our body doesn't respond the same amount that we used to use. We need more. We need to use more often. Sometimes we start to need it to be able to get to work. We start taking it like medicine. But late stage addiction, by the time a person realizes that they're deeply involved in the addiction, then they can't get out of it. That's the time when we can start to raise the bottom and bring awareness to the individual that they need to step out of this pattern that they've become involved in. Pain can no longer be ignored or drowned out with drugs or alcohol, so the drugs aren't working anymore. Hitting bottom means a person is forced to face the consequences of the irresponsible lifestyle. It's not easy, and many are very stubborn. One of the things that we understand about addiction is it's like a parasite. I said that a little bit earlier. This parasite gets into your brain, and then it goes into self-defense mode. It wants to protect itself. And so that's where we begin to see the behaviors of lying and stealing and trying to keep it hidden under wraps. And as soon as we start to address it, that's when the parasite starts to go into overdrive and start motivating the person to use whatever means necessary to get back to that addiction. When we're talking about rock bottom, we need to bring a level of discomfort that's greater than the discomfort of not using drugs to be able to motivate an individual to change. For some, hitting bottom is when they're homeless, penniless, and living on the streets. There may be some folks here, your loved one has gotten to that point. They've hit bottom when no one will loan them money to make it through their current crisis. For others, it's legal, marital, relational, or health issues. Most family members feel the pain much sooner than the addicted one. The reason for this is, it's funny, the person who's in addiction, I said, person in addiction is deeply involved with their addiction, but you folks as family members, you have an addiction as well. You're addicted to your loved one, to the point where your emotions ride on whether they are there or not, whether they're sober or not. You can't stop thinking about them. It may begin to impact your work, your family life, your relationships. The same impacts that we see in addiction, we start to see in the family members addicted to the addiction to their loved one. The nice thing for the addicted person is they have the drugs or the drink to be able to soften that. It helps to relieve some of the stress and pain of that. Well, you guys get to feel every single use and every single relapse fully. You don't have the numbing effect of the drugs or alcohol to be able to loosen that. So in some ways, family members experience addiction worse than the addicted person themselves. Drugs help to drown out the pain, plus the delusion that goes along with the drug use causes the addicted one to misunderstand the damage the drugs are doing in their life. So does every addicted person have a bottom? No. Here we go. For some people, their rock bottom is death. The absolute rock bottom is death, when there's no coming back from it. by overdose or drug-related activities. For others, it's suicide or life imprisonment or irreconcilable damage to self or others. Alcoholics Anonymous has a saying that if we keep using, the only outlook that we have is jails, institutions, and death. Jails, institutions, and death. And that's not the rock bottom that we want our loved ones to see. So what about your loved one? On the road to destruction, using drugs or alcohol or some other destructive behavior, they may be hurting you or the ones you love. What can you do? Some people say to get out of the way until they hit bottom, but we recommend that there's an opportunity for you as family members to help raise that bottom and bring them to a point of recognition of where they're at before they get there. So how do we do that? We have to spend some time looking inside of ourselves and recognizing patterns of enmeshment, being their relationships being too close. It's a natural biological desire for parents, especially for moms, to want to do anything to protect their child. When we're engaged in an intimate relationship, there's something in the brain that starts to attach to that person, and then we want to do anything that we can to prevent them from feeling pain. When we talk about motivation, one of the things that we believe in is pain-based motivation, that we can allow a person to experience the pain and the natural consequences of what's happening to them. We can pull back a little bit, allow them to experience those consequences to increase the level of pain from the bad choices that they're making, which becomes greater than the pain of change. A lot of the time people won't make a change until the pain of staying the same is worse than the pain of change. So some things we can do: we can stop rescuing our loved one. Raise the bottom for your loved one when you say no. You allow them to face the painful consequences of their irresponsible actions, and by doing that, you're no longer saving them from the consequences, which a lot of the time are there to help motivate them to make a better decision for themselves. You can tell them the truth, you can engage with them, and you can help to raise the bottom by being truthful about their problems. Again, family members a lot of the time see things before the addicted person does. And so you have a chance to be open and honest with your loved one. Now, are they going to receive that? A lot of the time they won't. Again, that parasite inside of them, this addiction, is going to go into overdrive and is going to protect them any way that they can. And a lot of the time that comes out with some pretty challenging behavior, a lot of yelling, a lot of threatening, devaluing your no. They come back and say, I heard you say no, but, and they try to motivate you to help them stay in their addiction. A lot of time this is when lies start to come out, and it's important to be able to have your facts in order and present them in an organized way so that the person can see that you know what you're talking about. Speak the truth, not in a torrent of frustration and rage, but firmly so the message is unmistakable. There's a script here that we've put together. You can say, you have a problem. You need to change, you need help. I can't change you. I won't make any more excuses for you. Help is available, but you must choose to get help yourself. The individual has to choose this for themselves. You can't control them. You can't control their addiction, you can't control them, and you can't force them into recovery, but you can create an environment to help influence them to make the decision themselves to go into recovery. A lot of the time we can do that through the legal system, allowing legal consequences to amass. There's things that we can do to help draw them into that. The other thing that we tell families to, that we recommend families share with their loved one, is that in your house, you've decided that it's going to be a house that's free from addiction, and you love your person, your loved one, but you don't love their addiction, and their addiction is not allowed. They're allowed in your house without the addiction, but if they bring the addiction with them, they won't be able to stay. Using language like that can help the individual to recognize, hey, we love you so much, but this addiction is killing you and we can't let that come into our house. We're going to make the decision for ourselves to enter recovery and to begin to recover from this. We would like you to join us in that decision. Number 3, for how to raise the bottom, don't make decisions for them. Challenge your loved one to get help. Give them alternatives. Speak the truth. You can provide them with options, several different options of places to go. Again, we said there's no one path to recovery, but put together some different things. Do some research and find places where people can go. Hey, Teen Challenge is a great place to go. We highly recommend it. It's someplace that you can get a hold of our admissions department ahead of time and have all of your information about Teen Challenge prior to recommending it to your loved one. But provide them with alternatives and options. Don't make decisions for them. And whatever you do, don't stop the pain, because the pain is the thing that's going to motivate them to finally enter recovery. 2 years of counseling, I've seen this over and over and over again, where an individual only came to treatment because they finally recognized how bad things had gotten. But they need to have their attention drawn to that. They need to be shown this is how bad it is. Pain motivates change. When we rescue our loved ones and prevent them from experiencing the painful consequences of their irresponsible actions and decisions, we feed their delusion and extend the path to hitting the bottom. Instead of raising the bottom, our wrong kind of help lowers the bottom, making their destructive path even longer. When we back out, we allow them to experience consequences, and that's when they will be more able to make the decision themselves to enter treatment. We can raise the bottom by starting early in life. Must learn early in life that the painful consequences for disobedience and poor decision making. Sooner in life, you start applying proper discipline and consistent boundaries. For your children, you raise the bottom for the trips down the road of irresponsibility. Again, you can do all of this and still have a person that enters, that finds themselves addicted. So we're not saying that you can cause their addiction, but there may be some things that you can do early in life to influence them not entering addiction later on. And get ready for emotional warfare. I told you there will be some challenging behaviors that come from these decisions that you as a family make. When you begin to raise the bottom, make your loved one face the painful consequences of their actions, with no more offers to rescue them, get ready for a flood of anger. And again, this is the addiction speaking. This isn't their loved one speaking. After about 3 weeks of inpatient treatment, I've been working with a lot of people who have said, wow, I didn't realize how awful I was. But now I'm starting to look at it, and I'd really like to get the chance to apologize. This is the type of thing that happens after somebody's entered recovery, after the addiction starts to go away. But while they're still deeply embedded in that addiction, they're doing whatever they can to protect the thing that they care about most, the thing that their brain has wrapped around and has been completely adjusted by. Their anger may take the same path as little children being disciplined who scream, "I hate you." You can't stand their rejection, you cave into their demands, you only lower the bottom, prolong their damage. The brain operating on that instinctual level is very similar to an underdeveloped brain in a child. Children, when they're first born, are purely instinctual. They cry when they're hungry, they cry when they're wet, they cry when anything needs to happen. When we see a brain go back to late stage addiction, it's operating on that purely instinctual level again, where the behaviors that happen are motivated purely by wanting to, it's survival. It's basically survival. Myth number 4, you can't force someone into treatment, they have to want help. And you can't control an individual, but treatment doesn't have to be voluntary to be successful. This is one of my favorite studies that I've seen recently. The National Institute on Drug Abuse had completed a study where they looked at people who were motivated by their probation parole officer. They said either you need to go to treatment or you need to go to jail. And most people will choose treatment simply because they want to be able to walk around outside. They want to be able to walk through a door and go outside and not be incarcerated in a prison cell. Other people, they find their own voluntary motivation to enter treatment. They say, you know what, I've gotten to a point in my life, this is pretty bad, I need to do something about it. And they'll walk into treatment themselves. The National Institute for Drug Abuse measured up these two different types of individuals, and they found at the beginning there's much more motivation on the side of people who chose to go to treatment themselves. People who didn't choose to go to treatment did not have as much internal motivation. But with the help of that external motivation, over the course of 3 to 4 weeks of inpatient treatment, they experienced very similar outcomes, even to the point that 5 years later, both groups of people were experiencing very similar outcomes. So, being externally motivated to enter treatment by you, the family members, taking away support, say, I'm not going to loan you money or allow you to come to my house or steal anymore. I'm not going to pick you up from treatment if you decide that you get there for a day and you don't really like it. I'm going to continue to encourage you to make good decisions. I'm not going to support your bad decisions. Those externally motivating factors can help an individual to experience the same level of lifelong success that somebody who gets to a point one day that says, hey, on my own, I decide I want to go to treatment. It's fascinating to me. I'm going to end this by saying you folks have a huge influence on the work that we do here. I look at us as working together as partners. The counselors that we have working here are great at what they do. But they by themselves understand they can't control an individual, they can only influence an individual. But we see a greater level of influence when we also engage with families. When we get you guys on board, when you come in for family sessions, when you're here for family days, when you're taking your loved one on these short trips that you get to take on weekend passes for the long-term program. You guys are participating in this individual's recovery, and you're having a huge impact on it. So it may be frustrating at times. There may be times when you're not really sure if it's the right thing to do, but you're still going to put your foot down and motivate and say, I'm not going to come and get you. I'm not going to support you leaving treatment or stepping back into addiction. When you do that, you're making a huge impact. I want to encourage you to keep plugging along, keep up the good fight, and keep supporting this person that you love so much as they're making right decisions and stepping into recovery. We love you guys, families, and anything that we can do to support you, just let us know. But thank you so much for spending a little bit of time with us today, talking about some of these myths of addiction.